Hello everyone and welcome back to the 3T Path channel. This is the Bhakti Club where we're going through the entire Uddhava-gita, a free online course for you. And if you want to watch the previous classes of this Uddhava-gita course, you must become a member of the Bhakti Club, and the instructions are here in the description of the video. You can become a member and then access the entire Uddhava-gita course at your leisure. So we're continuing here. We are now coming to the point where Uddhava has heard Krishna. Krishna has started speaking to Uddhava, giving him basic philosophy of yoga, very basic, wonderful, succinct renunciation yoga philosophy, how to abandon the world, how to give up the world and focus on spirituality. And now, having heard these few verses, we've had, this is verse 14 we're going to read now. So Krishna has spoken some verses, and now Uddhava is finally going to start asking. This is the process. This is how all these great scriptures work. Bhagavad-gita, Uddhava-gita, the entire Bhagavatam. It's always a disciple and the guru questions and answers. So now the guru spoke a little bit, and now Uddhava is going to raise a very important question which comes directly to us about the difficulty of renunciation. And is that the way? Is that the only way we can attain our spiritual perfection, is through renouncing? But it might not work for me. And let's hear what Uddhava has to say about that. So, chapter 7, verse 14 of Canto 11, we're reading the translation and purports by the followers of His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, mostly the work of my spiritual master, Srila Hridayananda Das Goswami Acharya Deva. So, chapter 14, verse 14. Sri Uddhava said, "My Lord," he's talking to Krishna, "you alone award the results of yoga practice. And you are so kind that by your own influence, you distribute the perfection of yoga to your devotee." So it's a very nice devotional prayer start to his questions. He says, no, you are the Lord. I mean, it's anything that happens is coming from you. The results of yoga come from you, because everything comes from God. So the results of yoga also come from God. It's not, oh, but I did my work, so therefore I must get the result. Well, it doesn't really work like that. You know, there is a personal relationship. It's not that God is obliged to do whatever just because you did a sequence of things and then like, oh, you filled out all the forms, so now God has to do this. You know, my spiritual master gives the example of the DMV, you know, the Department of Motorized Vehicles in the US, or whatever your country has the equivalent of. So you go to some government bureau like the DMV, and then you have to fill out these forms, right? You say, like, you do this, and you do this, and you do this, and if you do all these things and meet this criteria, then you will get this. You know, you'll get your license, you'll get your car registration. Like, you know, you do these things and you will get these things. They're obliged to give you that thing once you've filled out those requisites that have been cleared, you know, that have been made clear to you. But with God, it's not quite like that. It's not that He has to. It's just there's a personal thing. Nothing obliges God to do something. So there's a personal connection. So here's bringing it very personal. You give your devotees the results of yoga. You give the perfection of yoga to your devotee, which comes to the point as well that the perfection of yoga is devotion, so the devotee has received the perfection of yoga. But anyway, he goes on. Thus, you are the Supreme Soul who is realized through yoga. Another very important point. So it's like he's asking a question, he's making it, but he's actually, you know, his statements are full of transcendental knowledge. That's how it works. These great discourses between like super perfected devotees like Uddhava and Krishna. It's like whenever Uddhava is supposedly like asking questions, but it's actually, he knows everything already. So whatever he's saying is already, you know, scripture as well. So very important point. You are the Supreme Soul that is to be realized through yoga. So you, Krishna, I'm talking to you here, you're actually the objective. The goal of yoga is to understand you. And it is you who are the origin of all mystic power. So all yogic power and you know, all those, we're going to have a whole chapter on this way later on in the Uddhava-gita, a whole chapter on mystic powers, the vibhutis that are mentioned in Yoga Sutras as well. The whole, almost, you know, 3/4 of the 3rd chapter of the Yoga Sutras is about the vibhutis, the powers attained through yoga meditation practice. But he's saying, you're the origin of all those powers as well. For my supreme benefit, you have explained the procedure for giving up the material world through the process of sannyas, or renunciation. So here we have the word sannyas, right here in Sanskrit, in the verse, and now it was maintained here in the translation as well. So if you look back at the previous classes and you see what Krishna is teaching, it sounds like, you know, just giving up the world. It made more, you know, there was something to it. I was explaining what was behind it, but one could like interpret those previous instructions that Krishna laid out to Uddhava as just sannyas, renunciation, giving up the world. Because Krishna did mention like, oh, you know, forget everything and just walk off in the world, you know, focused on me. You know, so that part of was very sannyas-like, you know, give everything up, family, work, belongings, excuse me, give everything up and just go off in the world. So yeah, so there were some parts that did sound very much like that. So, but then he's saying, so you're asking me, you know, to give up the world to the process of sannyas, or renunciation. So this is a big point here. This is a huge point. So do we have to take sannyas to attain spiritual perfection? And Uddhava is going to play the part of someone who can't do that. And Arjuna, who hears the Bhagavad Gita, never becomes a sannyas. He's the prince of the world. He's the emperor prince. He's running the whole world. You know, he's completely the opposite of a sannyas. He's like the wealthiest person in the world. He's got multiple wives, children, he's got grandchildren, he's got an empire and palaces and the best chariots and golden ornaments and jewels. I mean, he's the opposite of sannyas. And he's the opposite of sannyas when the Bhagavad Gita starts, and he's the opposite of sannyas when the Bhagavad Gita ends. He doesn't change right up to the point where he leaves the world. So this is a very important question. Do we have to become a sannyas to attain spiritual perfection? Purport. The word yogesha here indicates that the Supreme Personality of Godhead awards the results of all yoga practices. Since all of the material and spiritual worlds emanate from the transcendental body of Krishna, there is nothing to be achieved by any yoga process except Krishna and his potencies. There's nothing else. There's literally nothing else. The view, the understanding of God in the yoga tradition is a little different from that which is seen in the Western and the Abrahamic religions. In the Christian tradition, in the yoga tradition, God is the source of everything. Material and spiritual, everything is his potency, is his energy. So there's nothing outside God. Everything is a manifestation of God's energy. Everything. So it's a different concept. It's like there's nothing you can achieve then through yoga except his potencies. And since the Lord remains eternally the master of his potencies, so not that God gives you his potencies, he's forever the master. This is the way it is. He is the Lord of everything. So since he remains the master of his potencies, no one can achieve anything through yoga or any other spiritual or material process except by the sanction of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So this is a very important, deep realization you can have as you go through life. Very important. This is emphasized as well in Bhagavad Gita. Everything is coming from God. Not just things, but also qualities. So if you say, oh, I want to be renounced, I want to be intelligent, I want to be strong, Well, these things are coming from God as well. I want to be beautiful and creative. But where are these things coming from? They're coming from God as well. So everything is coming from God. This is the position of the soul as completely dependent on God. Very important. And when we're in Maya, when we're in illusion, when we're all full of ourselves in pride and egocentrism, we think, no, it's me. It's all coming from me. It is my wealth, my intelligence, my creativity. It's all me. And don't even think about God. But that's deep illusion. It's actually all coming from God. So everything you have, that's a relationship. That's a way to build a beautiful relationship with God, is to understand reality. Because spirituality means aligning yourself with reality. That's one way to understand everything we're doing here. The purpose of all these scriptures is to align you with reality, to uncover the veils of illusion. So you know what's going on. And then when you know what's going on, then you can live your life accordingly, adjust your mind and your priorities according to reality. And that's how we become happy and stress-free and less anxious with yoga, because we're aligning ourselves with reality. And the closer you are to reality, the better you are, the more you can flow with life, the more things happen because you know what's happening. You're not like deluded, you're not making something up in your mind and being confronted with reality, surprising you in unpleasant ways. So everything is coming from God, and we should very much deeply meditate on this and understand this, that everything we have, and that's why we cultivate gratitude and love, and that's why we're going to use everything also as an offering to God, because everything is already His. It's already like, that's how you align yourself with this reality. The word yoga means linking up. And unless we link ourselves with the absolute truth, we remain covered by the darkness of ignorance. Thus, Krishna is the goal of yoga. Very important. Krishna is the goal of yoga. In the material world, we falsely try to link ourselves with the objects of the senses. Man wants to link with woman and woman with man, or one tries to link up with nationalism, socialism, capitalism, or innumerable other creations of the illusory energy of the Lord. Since we are linking ourselves to temporary objects, the relationships are temporary. The results are temporary. And at the time of death, we become bewildered when all of our connections are suddenly cut off by Maya. That's what happens. As a materialist, you become linked up with all these things you identify with. Home and your name and maybe you have some prestige, like, people think of you. Your social standing and your wealth and your children and your family and your nation and all these things. But you become attached to all these things, and then when death comes, it just cuts you off from all these things. You just cut off because that's it. It was all just linked to the body. So when you're ripped out of the body at death, you're bewildered and you suffer. If we link ourselves to Krishna, however, our relationship with Him will continue even after death. This is the point of spirituality. We're talking about eternal things. We're identifying with our eternal identity. We're connecting ourselves. Again, remember, reality. We're removing the veils of illusion. And like, who am I? Well, if you study spirituality, you know who you really are. Self-realization, it's called. Realizing yourself. So you know who you are, and then you connect with eternal things. Krishna, supremely eternal. So when you connect with Krishna, it's an eternal connection. So our relationship with him will continue even after death. As explained in Bhagavad-gita, the relationship with Krishna that we develop in this life will continue to increase in our next life until we achieve the supreme goal of entering Krishna's planet. Those who sincerely serve the mission of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, following the transcendental lifestyle described by the Lord, will enter the Lord's abode at the end of his or her lifetime. So this is another bit of good news that Krishna explains in Bhagavad Gita, that you continue your spiritual progress. You don't lose that. You lose everything else, right? All the material progress, all the money you saved up, the fame and the house you built and whatever you bought and the car, all those things you lose. And the abilities, you spend such a long time learning to play the piano and to do this sport or do that thing or to write or speak. You lose everything. So when you start again as a human, you have to learn how to go to the bathroom. You can't even hold your own poo. It's just like back to square zero. And that's how you suffer. So you lose everything, but you don't lose things when you're connected with spirituality. And Krishna, you continue them even if you don't attain perfection. You will continue in your next life, and Krishna is always there. One can never achieve a permanent situation by mental speculation. Or in other words, like just by thoughts and things, you can't achieve anything permanent like that because they will change. And what to speak of ordinary material sense gratification, right? Just gross materialism, completely not permanent, right? Whatever you do, it goes away, right? You have any pleasure, it's done. Everything just goes away. You get tired of it, you get bored, and things decay and fall apart, and there's nothing permanent there. By the methods of Hatha Yoga, Karma Yoga, Raja Yoga, Jnana Yoga, etc., one does not actually awaken his propensity for rendering eternal loving service to the personality of Godhead. Thus, one is bereft of the transcendental tastes of spiritual enjoyment. Sometimes the conditioned soul, disgusted by his or her failure to gratify his or her senses, bitterly decides to renounce the material world and merge into an impersonal, painless transcendence. But our actual happy situation is to render loving service to the lotus feet of the personality of Godhead. All of the different yoga processes gradually lead one to love of Godhead. And it is Lord Krishna's aim to re-establish the conditioned souls in this happy position. That's why Krishna came down. That's why he explained the Bhagavad Gita. That's why he's explaining Uddhava-gita. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is making this perfection easily available through the chanting of the holy names of Krishna, the supreme yoga process for this age. Okay, verse 15. Uddhava is going to continue with his, he's going to develop a question here. My dear Lord, O Supreme Soul, for those whose minds are attached to sense gratification. So he's putting himself in that position where we are actually. He's putting himself in our position. So, O Lord, for those whose minds are attached to sense gratification, and especially for those bereft of devotion unto you. So he's like, this is us. We have no devotion, we're attached to material things. So, for us, such renunciation of material enjoyment is most difficult to perform. This is my opinion. So he's laying out, he's pointing out a possible fault in Krishna's presentation. It's like, look, you gave this whole suggestion of giving everything up, of sannyas, and just thinking of you and going off in the world, but with this, I don't think this is going to work. I think this is going to be it's not going to work. Okay, people don't have devotion, they're attached to material sense. It's not going to work. So this is my opinion. It's not going to work. Purport. This is great, isn't it? Like, you can have this look, there's a problem here in this explanation. Purport. Those who are truly devoted to the Supreme Lord do not accept anything for their personal gratification, but rather accept those things suitable to be offered in the Lord's loving service. The word vishayatmabhi indicates those who desire material objects for their personal gratification instead of for the devotional service of the Lord. The minds of such materialistic persons are suitably disturbed, and it is virtually impossible for such persons to renounce material enjoyment. This is the opinion of Sri Uddhava. Verse 16, "O my Lord," Uddhava continues, "I myself," so now he's saying like, look, this is me, he's saying this is my situation. It's not just, I'm not talking just theoretically here. Of course, it's not his situation. But anyway, he's saying, I myself am most foolish. This is humility. These great souls, characteristic of them is they're humble. Humility is a sign of greatness. Very rare these days, almost impossible to find in this world of everybody's just so proud, everybody just wants to be number one and fame. So humility is almost unheard of, right, these days. But we'll see here these, just like as an avatar, Uddhava-gita, he's the most intelligent person on the planet. He's a pure devotee. He even looks like Krishna. He's got a body, it's like Krishna's. So he's like perfect avatar. But he says, I am most foolish because my consciousness is merged in the material body and bodily relations, which are all manufactured by your illusory energy. So this is actually, of course, our situation. He's just speaking up for the little guys, for us, right? This is our situation. And I like this. This is a very good way for you to see this. My consciousness is merged. I like that. Good word, isn't it? Merged. Our consciousness is merged in the material body. So this is the situation now. Merged. And of course, the bodily relations, family and friends, and your dog and your cat. And so merged. And of course, this has all been created by Maya, all these things, my body, all of matter is Krishna's energy, Maya. So this is all like, that I think I have a body, that I connect, it's my son, my mother, my father, my friend, my neighbor. These are all, of course, my cat. These are all material illusions created by the gunas. Thus I am thinking, I am this body, and all these relatives are mine. This is exactly what everyone is doing. Right? So Uddhava is just poking his finger right at the soil. This is exactly what's going on. I am this body and all these relatives are mine. This is what we're all thinking here. Therefore, my Lord, please instruct your poor servant. Please tell me how I can very easily carry out your instructions. So this is great, isn't it? It's like, look, I'm totally attached, totally materialistic, so how can I carry out your instructions? It's beautiful, isn't it? It's great. It's a great setup. It's amazing. So we're very grateful that Uddhava was so humble and thought of us and put himself in our place. Purport. It is very difficult to give up false identification with the material body. And thus we remain attached to our so-called bodily relations, such as wife, children, friends, and so on. Bodily attachment causes intense pain within the heart, and we are stunned by lamentation and hankering. Sri Uddhava, a pure devotee of the Lord, here speaks like an ordinary person, showing how to pray to the personality of Godhead. We practically see that many sinful persons enter the International Society for Krishna Consciousness and after preliminary purification become most repentant for their previous illicit activities. They are shocked when they realize how they gave up the personal association of God to pursue the useless forms created by Maya. Therefore, they wholeheartedly pray to the spiritual master and Lord Krishna to be engaged eternally in transcendental devotional service. Such a repentant, eager mentality is most auspicious for spiritual advancement. The Lord certainly answers the prayers of a repentant devotee, desperate to escape the clutches of illusion. This is great, isn't it? This is a great line. It's wonderful, isn't it? The Lord certainly answers the prayers of a repentant devotee, desperate to escape the clutches of illusion. So let us try to manifest those qualities. Verse 17. My dear Lord, you are the absolute truth, the supreme personality of Godhead, which means satyas. You're like the origin of what is, of all reality. You're the object, you are the absolute truth. And you reveal yourself to your devotees. So look, you're the source of all reality, of all truth. And it is you who reveals yourself to your devotees. Besides your lordship, I do not see anyone who can actually explain perfect knowledge to me. So Uddhava is saying, look, there are no other gurus for me, only you. Good for him. He was right in front of God. So yeah, that's the best guru you can get. Such a perfect teacher is not to be found even among the demigods in heaven. No, certainly not, because of course Krishna is God and the demigods are his servants and bewildered souls as well. Indeed, all of the demigods headed by Lord Brahma are bewildered by your illusory potency. They are conditioned souls who accept their own material bodies and bodily expansions to be the highest truth. So here, it's interesting, right? I mean, this is verse 17. This is only 17 verses into the Uddhava-gita, because Uddhava-gita starts with chapter 7 in the Srimad Bhagavatam. So this is only the 17th verse. And already a point that is emphasized in the Bhagavad Gita twice by Krishna in chapter 7 and chapter 9 is here brought up by Uddhava, which is to, let's just make sure everybody's on the same page here, because we're talking yoga, we're talking God, so make sure everybody's on the same page. In this culture, of course, in our culture, not a big deal. But if you go back, 5,000 years ago, people were like, demigods, they were demigod worshippers, like it was the thing. It is Vedic religion is to worship the demigods, as is the religion of ancient Greece and Rome and ancient northern people and the pagans and the Africans, and it's everybody's previous religion before yoga and the Abrahamic religions that came up from yoga was to worship the demigods. All right? So just to put everybody on the same page, he's like dissing, he's not dissing, but he's putting the demigods in their place. He's revealing the truth about the demigods. So look, everybody just know that the demigods, they are bewildered by your Maya, just like everybody else. They're also bewildered by Maya. Zeus, who's called Indra in the Vedic tradition, who's called Thor in the Marvel universe and in Nordic tradition. So they're all just bewildered by Maya just the same. They're also conditioned souls. So this is a very important statement, because people are like, oh, demigods, they're very special. No, they're just conditioned souls like you and me and your cat. Your cat, you, me, and the demigods, it's just the same. We're all conditioned souls, fooled by the Lord's illusory potency. But we have different bodies, different karma being manifest at this time. So your cat could have been a demigod. No problem with that. Your cat, your dog, eons ago could have been a demigod. Probably was. In fact, we're certain it was, because the concept in Vedic tradition is of devolution. Everybody starts as Lord Brahma. So you were Lord Brahma, you have been Indra, you have been the Lord of the oceans, of the skies, you have been the Lord of the other demigods. You've done all these things. And then to become an animal, you have to go through your human life. No soul starts out as a dog or a cat. They start out as Lord Brahma, and then they go accumulating karma and going down in the wheel of birth and death. So your pet was once Lord Brahma. You were once Lord Brahma. So now look where that, oh, Lord Brahma, look where, no, now it's your pet. That's the way it works. That is samsara. That is the wheel of birth and death. So it's important to let's understand that we're all in the same boat here. From Lord Brahma down to the smallest, whatever living creature, bacteria thingy is, we're all in the same boat. We're all conditioned souls with different material bodies. It's just all of us souls and God. So that's why there's no better guru than God. So very important. Purport. All conditioned souls from Lord Brahma down to the insignificant ant are declared by Sri Uddhava to be covered by material bodies produced by the illusory potency of the Lord. The demigods in heaven, being absorbed in universal management, constantly utilize their fabulous material potencies. They therefore gradually fix their minds upon their mystically empowered bodies, and also upon their bodily expansions, such as their celestial wives, children, co-workers, and friends. In the course of life in the heavenly planets, the demigods become conditioned to think in terms of material good and bad. And thus they accept the immediate welfare of their bodies to be the highest goal of life. The demigods do, however, try to strictly follow the laws of God. And to help them do this, the Supreme Lord descends to remind the heavenly beings of His own Supreme Personality, which possesses powers infinitely exceeding theirs. Of course, their powers came from God. Again, everything we have comes from God. So the demigods, but the power came from God. If you look at Krishna's life here on the planet when he came, 5,000 years ago, you see all these different stories of Lord Brahma being fooled by Krishna, little child Krishna, Lord Indra, getting angry, right? He does the whole rain, he tries to destroy Vrindavan, very, very famous, Govardhan pastime. So he does these things because he thought he's just this little boy, he forgot. He's like, who's this little blue boy? But then he's reminded, oh, this is the Supreme Lord. Then he apologizes, he asks for forgiveness. So you see these things, and then in other incarnations and other avatars, when the demigods, oh yeah, of course, God, we just forgot about it, but yes, thank you for reminding us, So they forget. Sri Uddhava, however, being a pure devotee of the Lord, is determined to go back home, back to Godhead for eternal life, and is thus not at all interested in the sophisticated Vedic knowledge of the demigods. The material world is a gigantic prison whose inmates are subjected to birth, death, old age, and illusion, and a pure devotee has no desire to remain there even as a first-class prisoner like the demigods. Sri Uddhava desires to return to the kingdom of God, and for this reason directly approaches the personality of Godhead. The Lord is Swadrisha, one who reveals himself to his or her, to his devotee. Thus, only the Lord himself, or his or her pure devotee, who faithfully repeats the Lord's message, can take one beyond the material sky into the free atmosphere of the spiritual planets, where the liberated souls enjoy an eternal life of bliss and omniscience. Very nice. So we'll end here with these beautiful words of liberty, of freedom, of spiritual freedom here. Okay, so Uddhava has thus put himself in the position of a lowly, fallen soul and asking Krishna to present a clearer understanding, because he is God, he's beyond all the demigods, and all the demigods are confused as well, so there's no other source but God, which is why we have Uddhava-gita and Bhagavad-gita, which is why Krishna comes down, which is why Krishna says in Bhagavad-gita, Yoga Nashta Parantapa, I came down to re-establish yoga because it had been lost. So the knowledge, this kind of spiritual knowledge, gets lost. So God has to personally come down and explain it, because everybody else is an illusion, is a conditioned soul. That's what we need, God coming down, and then we can take advantage of this and repeat and read this wonderful text and then learn from it and become enlightened. So thank you very much for your time and your patience. Have a wonderful day with lots of peace and lots of love. Hare Krishna.